Okay, so welcome back to another interesting tutorial on loops. Now in the previous tutorial we talked about the for loop and I said that we'll be dealing with the while loop in this one. Now I don't know why but people are actually scared while using the while loop, and that is because there is a reason which I will not tell you guys right now. You will understand it hopefully till the end of this tutorial. So there is a very slight difference between the for and the while loop. The functionality is almost similar, but the syntax is a bit different. So let's take a look at the syntax of a while loop. Again, we have the exact same basic outline, but if you guys remember, in the case of for loop, we had three things, right? We had initialization, we had something called the condition, and we had updation, and all of them were together inside this bracket, right? But in the case of while loop we have the initialization before the body of the loop. If I can spell it right. Okay, initialization, then we have the condition in here, and we have the updation inside the body of the loop, right? So that is the basic syntax of a while loop. And again we are going to make the exact same piece of code which we made in the previous one, so that you guys can relate and understand why people are afraid of using the while loop. So we'll initialize the value of I to 0, and if I remember correctly the condition was I was less than or equal to 10, and we will go ahead and we'll display the value of I and I. Now before we forget, we need to update the value inside the loop. Now updation is usually the last line, because you know whatever you want to do, you do it in here, and before exiting the block just go ahead and update it. So let's quickly run this and see, and I'll explain you the flow once we see the output. Okay, so we got the exact same output as the last one. So again let me explain the flow once again. As in the case of for loop, the initialization is carried out exactly once and only once. In the for loop it was in here, but in the while loop it basically looks like it is not a part of the loop, which is how it should be, because you know it is executed only once and loop statements are supposed to be executed repeatedly. Now again, once it is initialized, the condition is checked and the loop body is executed, updation takes place, again the condition is checked, body is executed, updation takes place, and this goes on till the condition is true, right? So I'll also tell you guys quickly about the nesting in the exact same manner which we did for the for loop. So let's make another loop variable j, and now here's something very important. Before actually writing this another while loop, what we need to do is we need to initialize the value of j as well, right? So if you initialize the value of j right here, you will definitely not get the expected output. So let's actually go ahead and see the wrong output so that we understand what is actually happening in here. And again we'll update the value of j inside the j's block and not in the I block, right? So make sure that you update the value of j inside the j block and the value of I inside the I block, which basically means outside the j block, right? So let's again run this piece of code. In the previous one we got 4 zeros, 4 ones, 4 twos, up to 4 tens, right? But here we got only 4 zeros. Now that is because of the initialization. We did not initialize it at the right place. Let me tell you the flow of this piece of code and then we'll look at the correct one. So what happens is that the I value is less than equal to 10, which is true because it is 0. So it goes inside the loop. Now it starts checking for j. J value is less than 4. Yes, the value of j is 0 for the moment. Okay, so it prints the value of I and it increments the j value to 1. Now 1 is less than 4, true. Again this happens and it goes on till 4 times. But now the value of j is 5, right? And the condition is that j is less than 4, so it will exit the j's body and it will again go to the i's body. And here I will be incremented to 1. The condition is indeed true and it will come back to the j's case. But what happened is that the j's value is 5 because we have not made it 0. So what we understand from this is we actually need to initialize the value of j just before the j's loop, because every time we execute the i's body we need to initialize or we need to re-initialize j to 0, right? Because every time we need to start with a 0 so that it goes till 4 times. So now if we run it, hopefully we should get the correct output. So there we go, we get four zeros, ones, twos, and up to tens. That is exactly which we wanted, right? So this is a very, basic, because as I told you, we have the initialization before the loop, we have the loop body, and we have the updation inside the loop body. So this is one loop and this is another loop. So that is how the nesting actually works. It is basically the syntax of one loop inside the syntax of another loop, and the inner loop is executed repeatedly till this condition is true, right? So 10 into 4, again it is executed, or sorry, 11 into 4, it is executed 44 times. So we get 4 values for each number, right? So that was all about the while loop. Now I hope you guys have understood how people are actually afraid of using it, because people mostly mess this up. They initialize it over here, and they, updation they do together, so they get some weird output. But as I said, there's nothing to worry. If you just pay a bit of attention, you can easily achieve whatever you want to. And while loop is basically fun to use because it is a bit challenging than the for loop. Apart from that, there is no difference between these two. So go ahead, try it out. Then in the next one, we'll be talking about the do while loop, which is slightly different from these two. So I'll see you guys there.